Now, there's another thing that's heading our way, or the way of Congress and eventually all of us, like a freight train. And it's the fact that the federal government is very close right now to defaulting on its financial obligations for the first time in history. Now, we've heard this a million times before, I understand. But once again, the Republicans are saying they're not going to raise the debt ceiling. That whole thing, which I don't completely understand, but to me, a debt ceiling is just ridiculous bullshit. What difference does it make how much the United States owes? What? People are going to show up on the doorstep of the United States with IOUs and demand the money and the economy is going to collapse? No, it doesn't work that way. And in fact, a lot of the national debt is owned by Americans. But I digress. But once again, with this particular potential catastrophe, the debt ceiling, Democrats, again, have got to be the grown-ups and keep these Christian fascists from causing a global catastrophe. Now, granted, if we default on our obligations, it's going to affect just about every economy on the planet. I understand that. But this is what Democrats always have to do. In the Congress, they have to be the grown-ups to prevent these infantile, thumb-sucking Republican Christian fascists from trashing the Constitution and or causing a global catastrophe. And that's how the U.S. government works now. We've got one political party, the Democratic Party, capital D, and then we have the Christian fascists who want to see, are determined to see everything fall apart. And all of this is happening because Congress has not yet voted to lift, once again, the statutory debt limit. And it's necessary to lift that in order to pay the bills that Congress has already committed to pay under both Democratic and Republican leaders. But the Christian fascists don't give a shit. So as Catherine Rampell wrote about this in the Washington Post, and she writes this, quote, "To state the obvious, a default would be bad," end quote. Bad? Well, not only would it be bad, but the government would have trouble paying Social Security checks, salaries to our military personnel, and all the creditors who previously lent money to Uncle Sam. That includes a vast number of American citizens. And a default would also violate the Constitution. The Constitution of the United States, which says, I'm quoting here, "The validity of the public debt of the United States shall not be questioned," end quote. Which means simply that we are the best people to lend money to because it's in our Constitution that our paying the money back will happen, period. But finally, as Charlotte Rampell points out, to default on the national debt or to not raise the debt ceiling would trigger chaos through the whole global financial system. And as we know, we should know, I think I know this, and you probably do too, that financial markets currently treat U.S. debt as virtually risk-free. And all other debts are benchmarked against it. Everybody knows the United States will pay what we owe. I mean, aren't we the richest country on earth, even though our citizens don't live that way? The vast majority of our citizens don't live that way. But if we show that our debt is not really risk-free, that instead we're kind of lackadaisical about paying our creditors, well, according to the economists, that would cause panic to rip through global markets as well as the U.S. market. And, it's not necessary to say this, but this is not what we need right now. I mean, oh my God. But again, the Christian fascists want to load on as much potential disaster and catastrophe and apocalyptic shit as they possibly can. They're so determined to crash this country. To what? Make way for Jesus? Why are they doing this? But there's a simple fix to this. Very simple. Congress could raise the debt limit or suspend it altogether. What the hell is a debt limit? I mean, what does that mean? Now, according to the Post, lawmakers have done that, suspended or raised the debt limit 78 times since 1960. 50 of those times under Republican presidents and 28 times under Democratic presidents. That's according to the Treasury Department. So, okay, then it should be a very easy task given the absolute catastrophe that would result if this is not done. But here we go again with these goddamn Christian fascists. That potential catastrophe is precisely why the Christian fascists see the debt ceiling as a valuable political hostage, as Charlotte Rampell puts it. In theory, having to vote on the debt limit is supposed to remind lawmakers of their free spending habits. With free spending, okay, in the death budget, the military budget, yeah, there's a lot of free spending. In the free spending, like subsidizing the oil and gas companies, yeah, there's a lot of it there. But that's it in theory. But in practice, having members of Congress vote periodically to raise the debt ceiling only creates to raise opportunities for more crises. I mean, if we have to keep doing this until we finally have a Christian fascist administration in place in the White House and the legislative branch, and they say, no, we're not going to raise it, screw it, then everything does collapse, and that's what they want. For example, when Obama was president, Republicans decided to play this shitty game and brought the government to the brink of default. And back in 2011, according to the Post, I don't remember this, but I'm sure if I thought hard enough or checked my notes from way back in 2011, I'd find it. But there was an episode back then that led to the U.S. government's first ever credit downgrade. We were downgraded. One of the credit rating agencies here in the United States downgraded the credit rating of the country because of what the Christian fascists were doing. So, on the other hand, when the orange vomit, this filthy, stinking, rotten Donald Trump was president, the Christian fascist lawmakers suspended the debt ceiling several times. And the Democrats went along with that shit when the orange vomit was president because they knew that no good could come from a default. So they went along with it. So now Democrats are demanding that Republicans do the same. Quit playing your shitty little games, quit acting like 3-year-olds, and do what an adult lawmaker is supposed to do. Well, the demand from the Democrats of the Republicans is proving to be very naive and kind of like Charlie Brown expecting that Lucy really is going to hold the football for him this time so he can kick it, right? As Charlotte reports, let me just quote directly, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell and even supposedly reasonable Democrats like Susan Collins of Maine have said they'll play no part in lifting the debt ceiling. They say it's up to Democrats to address the issue using a special legislative process called reconciliation, which allows bills to pass with only 50, that is, Democrat only, 50 Senate votes. End quote. Now, Democrats don't want to do this. Their reasons are a bit complicated, but basically what the Democrats are afraid of is how this will look in a negative way where it concerns good governance, right? How many times have we been told, this is bullshit, but how many times have we been told, well, American families live within their budget, so should the federal government, which is nonsense. It's a total nonsense. It's bullshit. American families can't print their own money. I mean, American families have X amount of income, Y amount of outgo, which equals Z, either a plus or a minus in the checkbook at the end of the month. But it doesn't work that way for the government. Now, according to Charlotte, if lawmakers, especially the Christian fascists and Democrats, if they address the debt limit through the usual legislative process, but see, that's one that requires some of these Christian fascists to vote with the Democrats, then the Congress could either raise the limit to a specific dollar figure or suspend it for pick a number, some period of time. And for just about the past 10 years, Congress has repeatedly chosen the suspension option. Now, lawmakers, according to the Washington Post, they prefer this strategy because it avoids scary headlines about how much Congress added to the debt. And we voters, I mean, what do we know about this? Seriously, what do you know about this bullshit? I don't know anything about it. Do you? But we're often confused about what the debt limit is. And we don't understand that it involves paying off bills already incurred rather than authorizing new spending. And this is where the Christian fascists keep trying to confuse the issue even further. They make it sound like if the debt ceiling is raised, then all of a sudden the liberal Democrats under Nancy Pelosi are going to start spending trillions of dollars. And that's the only reason the debt ceiling is being raised, which is bullshit. Currently, according to what Charlotte has written here, the Democrats are trying to shame, this will never work because he's a Christian fascist, but they're trying to shame Mitch McConnell into voting for the Democrats' plan to suspend the debt ceiling until December 2022. 14 months. Oh, no, that's not going to happen. Worse, the Democrats have omitted instructions for a debt limit increase from the budget resolution that they passed back in August. The Democrats passed, no help from the Republicans. So the current budget resolution then dictates that what they can and can't do through this process of reconciliation. So in effect, what the Democrats did back in August when they passed the budget resolution, what they did, they handed themselves over to Republicans. They handed the whole idea as a hostage over to the Republicans. Now, the Democrats could go back and amend their budget resolution, but that's a very involved process, apparently, will require a lot of floor time. And don't forget what the Biden administration is trying to do. There are so many things that Biden is trying to do, and most of the Democrats are trying to do to push this country forward. With the infrastructure bill, whether it's social infrastructure or physical infrastructure, the addressing the horror of climate change, all the things that the Biden administration is trying to do requires an enormous amount of time in the legislative branch because of all the games that have to be played. And right now, nobody knows exactly when the government will, in theory anyway, quote, run out of money, end quote. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcasts. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.